So we have introduced slope. This says we're going to find the slope of a line using a graph or a table. This is actually wrong. We're only going to do the slope of a line from a graph. Okay? We talked about slope being steepness. How steep is a line? We talked about the 4 types of slope. A line can have positive slope, negative slope, zero slope, or undefined slope. Today we're going to learn how to associate a number with the slope of a line. A line has a slope that's an actual number, okay? Now, the way slope is defined, slope is actually a ratio. Slope compares 2 things. And the slope of a line actually compares the change in a line's y-coordinates, and I'm going to abbreviate coordinates, to the change in the line's x-coordinates. So the ratio of the change in a line's y-coordinates to the change in its x-coordinates is the value of its slope. A couple of ways you may see this written. You may see slope written as rise over run. The rise of a line, how do you rise? You go up, right? So a line's rise is its up or down movement. Well, what coordinate gives you up or down movement? The y-coordinates, right? The run is the change in the x-coordinates. If you're running horizontally along with the x-coordinates, which way are you going? Left or right, okay? So a line's rise is up or down, that's its change in y-coordinates. Its run is left to right, that's its change in x-coordinate. The other way you might see this is going to use a Greek letter, looks like a triangle. It's the Greek letter delta. Delta y. Delta means change in. So delta y means the change in y over delta x is the change in x. So that's a more fancier mathematical way to write it. So slope compares the change in a line's y-coordinates to its change in x-coordinates. Here's how you do it. We have a line here, okay? Notice they specifically picked out 2 points for us. And what we're going to do, we're going to draw a right triangle. A right triangle has a right angle, that's important, a right angle, and it has to use the grid lines. So notice these grid lines here. So if I go horizontally and then vertically, I'm going to make a right triangle, okay? So you're not going to draw a right triangle out in space somewhere or wherever you want. It's got to connect these 2 points, and it's got to use grid lines. So this is how this one would look. I'm going to use this grid line here, and I'm going to connect it to this point using this grid line here. So I chose these 2 grid lines. Notice I also could have done the same thing down here. Doesn't matter if you use the triangle up above or the triangle below. Together they would make a rectangle. Same-o, same-o. Okay? So the slope of a line is the change in y over the change in x. Delta y over delta x. Now, remember, change in y, that's up and down. Y coordinates move up or down. We are going to count how many spaces are on this vertical segment. Don't count corners, you're counting spaces. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the change in y for this line is 6. What I forgot to say, what I should have said before, first look at this. What kind of slope does this line have? Does it have positive, negative, zero, or undefined? It is going up from left to right, so it has positive slope, right? So there's a plus out here. We don't have to write it, but this line has positive slope. Then we can say the change in y is 6. Then we're going to count the change in x, the run of the line. So we're going to count the spaces from here to here. So we count spaces 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The change in x is 8. You always look, slope is normally a fraction. You always look and you ask, does it simplify? Well, 6/8 does. This simplifies to 3/4. So the slope of this line is 3/4. For every rise of 3, the line runs 4. Okay? Now let's look at this next one. They've picked 2 points for us. Here and here. We want to use grid lines and we want to connect those 2 points. So I'm going to use this vertical grid line and this horizontal grid line, and I get this right triangle. Okay? So I write delta y over delta x, change in y over change in x. What kind of slope does this line have? It's going down from left to right. It is a nice negative, right? So we need to write that negative right away so we do not forget that this line has negative slope. Then we count our rise, our change in y, that's our vertical movement. There is one space here. We count our run, that's our horizontal movement. How many spaces there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the slope of this line is negative 1/5. It has negative slope, and for every vertical change of 1, there's a horizontal change of 5. Now, what about our two special cases? Look at this line here. What kind of line is that? That's a horizontal line. What kind of slope does a horizontal line? Horizontal line has slope 0. Done. Don't have to show any work, but we want to see why. Where does that 0 come from? So let's look. Let's do change in y over change in x. So if we look at this line, the first thing you should notice is there's not a way to connect these 2 points using a right triangle in grid lines. We can't go down and over or up and over and ever hit the other point. So we can't even draw a triangle. So that should be a clue something's weird. So look at a horizontal line. What kind of rise does a horizontal line have? Do the y coordinates change at all? Look at your y coordinates, 4 and 4. So what's the change in y? The change in y is 0. Now the x coordinates do change. There is horizontal movement from here to here, so let's count spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we get 0 over 6. What is 0 divided by anything? If I have $0 and I share with 6 of my friends, we each get how much money? We each get 0. So 0 divided by 6 is 0. There is no rise, there is run, so 0 divided by anything is 0. Now, what about a vertical line? What kind of slope does a vertical line have? Slope dude falls off the cliff. What does he yell? Undefined. The slope of a vertical line is undefined. End of story. Why? Let's look at the numbers. Well, we know slope is change in y over change in x. Okay? Does this line, do the y coordinates change? They do, don't they? They go from 1 to 5. So the change in y is 1, 2, 3, 4 here. What's the change in x? Is there any run to this line? Is there any horizontal movement? Do the x coordinates change? No. So this is 4 divided by 0. Well, in math, division by 0 can't happen. If you divide by 0, you're saying that you can multiply by 0 and get 4. Not possible, okay? So division by 0 is undefined. We cannot divide by 0. One way that you might remember this, if you think about okay, when 0 is in the numerator, this is okay, and the answer is 0. But when 0 is in the denominator, it's a big no, okay? You cannot have 0 in the denominator. It's undefined. Sometimes you have to pick the points on the line. Look at these lines. They don't actually have points picked out for us, but we know there are an infinite number of points on this line. We've got to pick 2 that will help us find the slope. The issue is you've got to be careful. Notice, you know this line goes through all these squares, right? It goes through all the squares. We can't pick a point in the middle of a square. We have to pick a point that goes through a corner. So like right there, or right there, or right there. That has to go through the corner. You can't pick a point that's just out in the middle of a square somewhere. It has to go, I call them through the crosshairs. It's got to go through the corners, through the little T's. Okay? So I see, I'm going to pick this point right here, and I'm going to pick this point right here. Okay? So I picked my 2 points. I'm going to write delta y over delta x. Does this line have positive or negative slope? It has positive slope. Draw your little slope triangle. Count your change in y, that's up and down. I see 1, 2, 3. Change in y is 3. Change in x, that's your horizontal movement. 1, 2, 3. 3 over 3 simplifies to 1. It's okay for slope to be a whole number. You just don't want slope to be like a mixed number or decimal or something weird. Improper fraction or whole number. Okay? Now, look at this next line. You got to pick 2 points. Remember, you want those points to go through corners of the squares. So I see a point here, and I see a point here. I'm going to do change in y over change in x. What kind of slope does this line have? Negative. So I'm going to draw my slope triangle. Use your grid lines. Make sure it's a right triangle. My change in y, that's up and down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 over my change in x, that's left and right, is 2. Negative 6 over 2 is negative 3. Here's your practice. I want you to pause the video. I want you to do these 4 on your own. Then turn the video back on and check it. If you have any questions, if things aren't working, you don't get the right answer even after you check it, get some help, and then these notes will go in your notebook. I got positive 2/3. This line has undefined slope. Notice I didn't have to show the work for that if I know it's a vertical line. This line had slope of negative 1/2. This line had slope of positive 1/2. If you have any questions or maybe you think I messed up, which is always possible, let me see your work.